Vice President Joe Biden revealing some of what his first 100 days might look like. It's actually the first time I've ever heard any real concretes outside of the non-coronavirus legislation.
I can't think of a single other thing he's listed as first 100 days.
Many times I'm like, what is he going to do in his first 100 days other than undo some things that Trump has done? He said it yesterday during a human rights campaign town hall, talking about how he will be trying to pass the Equality Act through Congress as soon as in his first 100 days. He actually spoke during that town hall. Let's take a listen.
I think enacting the Equality Act will be one of the top priorities I have, but it's important. It's an important step. Look, it makes clear that existing civil rights law ban discrimination based on gender or sexual orientation, period. No more landlords refusing tenants, no more schools ignoring harassment, no more employees firing people just because of who they are. 9 out of 10 Americans think that firing someone for their sexual orientation is wrong.
So you can see there, Krystal, the reason I thought of it was because of one of the great monologues you've done here about Virginia, where they pass, the Equal Rights Amendment, but they can't pass worker pay. Virginia's like, what'd you say, 51st in the nation?
It's worst in the nation in terms of workers' rights.
In terms of workers' rights and pay. And it just typifies the ascendant kind of white suburbanite, cultural progressive, but not economically progressive, suburbanites, never Trumpers that exist within the Democratic Party and catering to them. As I said, that is the first real sign that I've seen from Biden about what he would actually do in his first 100 days. And I'm like, oh, cultural tokenism. That, like, you're literally coming out here and saying that you'll pass the Equal Rights Act while you're not talking about, from a left perspective, you're not talking about healthcare. From a right perspective, you're not talking about industrial policy, talking about China. And really what it is, I tweeted this in response. If you want to guarantee that social conservatives come out and all vote Trump all the way down the line, it's because of stuff like this. Because you're not even trying to talk to their economic considerations. That's the only way that any sort of bridge could ever be built. And you're going basically straight at their heart with the Equality Act. It's like, okay, you're basically setting it up so that people are going to vote Trump no matter what. I actually saw this in the New York Times. A New York Times reporter started reporting on younger Republicans and asked them, so why do you still vote Republican? Every single one of them said, I disagree with the Republican Party on climate change. I disagree with the Republican Party on economic policy. I disagree with the Republican Party on X. They go, okay, well, why do you still vote for them? They all said one thing: culture, abortion. That was it. The number one thing all the way down the line.
I support the Equality Act. I absolutely support civil rights for gay Americans, for the LGBTQ community, like 100%. Let's put that out there. But what I've talked about here before is it is a matter of priorities. And essentially, as you're pointing to, as the party has centered itself around white affluent suburbanites, the economic interests that used to be the center of the party have been not even like pushed off to the side. It's just been like gutted and eliminated. Right. They occasionally will pay like a lip service to it, but Virginia's the perfect example. And when I gave that monologue, it was actually in response to Jamel Bouie of the New York Times wrote this piece that was like, look, guys, be excited about a Biden administration because just look at Virginia. This is now a blue state. It's controlled by a Democratic governor and House and Senate. And look at all this great stuff they've gotten accomplished. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yes, they passed things very similar to the Equality Act. They passed the Equal Rights Amendment, which literally does nothing. They passed some stuff about Confederate monuments. Like, okay, good. I support all of that. That's fine. But at the same time, they are still 51 out of 51 in the country in terms of workers' issues. Some of them at least, ran on repealing right to work.
Right.
Well, the minute that they get it on, no, their corporate donors had different ideas about that, so that gets pushed off. They ran on collective bargaining for public employees, one of the only states in the country that doesn't have that. Well, they watered that down too. They ran on $15 minimum wage. Well, we'll wait on that in the future. And then as soon as the pandemic hit, Governor Ralph Northam of blackface notoriety, he came out and said, with this crisis, we've got to push off this collective bargaining thing. We got to push off this minimum wage hike. And so even that gets pushed to the side. So again, they are still 51 out of 51 in a blue state. Democrats control every part of the government in the state of Virginia, and that is still where they stand. And so, look, I support the Equality Act, But when you talk about priorities and first 100 days, it's exactly the sort of that this is what you would spend all of your political capital on, that this is what you would talk about, that this is what you would focus on without doing these other pieces, means that you are not actually even looking out for that community that you claim to be looking out for. Because what is very important to their lives as well, and LGBTQ people are disproportionately, working class and working poor, you aren't looking out for their economic interests. You're only focusing on this one particular aspect of their identity.
Well, it's like I said, if you want people to vote outside of their cultural interests, you're going to have to speak to their economic interests. And like the Equality Act, and the reason that people don't own the rights don't support it is because it basically would allow the government and a Biden administration to go to war with religious nonprofits and charities and force them to do things that are against their beliefs. I think this is America, and I think that that's wrong. And so you can see that if you declare war on them on the cultural front, and you're not even willing to talk to people's economic interests, nobody will ever meet you in the middle. Like I saw this. This is basically an ad for the Trump campaign. This is the Mike Pence strategy of There's a Flight 93 analogy that was talked a lot about. We've talked about here on the show in 2016 for a lot of Republicans saying, look, this is it. This is your last chance to have any sort of shot of controlling the culture in America with the bulwark of the government. Because without it, you're done. You're going to have equality acts all day long, and you're not going to have any sort of economic opportunity in America. And I think that, look, the economic part didn't exactly work out. But in terms of the culture, this is why so many social conservatives do back Trump. It's because it's not just about abortion. It's about, like I was talking about, religious nonprofits and charities. This is half the country. And they're consistently whitewashed from so much of the culture and the discussion that it makes it so that whenever they look at something like this, it makes it existential for them. It truly feels existential for so many cultural conservatives in America. And I think that there's so much more to cultural conservatism than just, abortion or gay marriage or any of these other type guns. Those are more like libertarian ones. And what I've tried to do on this show, and I think that you understand this, is try to move it in an economic direction, which is that actually good family policy is good economic policy, is making sure and setting up an economy in which people can thrive in a family unit is actually a kind of a conservative practice. But nobody talks about it that way.
Right.
And so this just sets up for the same old culture politics that we've had for the last 30 years in America.
Well,
Does anybody really
why?
live that?
And why does it collapse down to that? It's because when you have a sort of gridlock around these economic issues, I wouldn't even call it gridlock, because there's actually a bipartisan consensus around that gridlock, around maintaining the status quo, which overwhelmingly benefits corporate interests and the wealthy among us, as you all know. And so you basically collapse down to sort of the culture wars, cultural signaling, right? It's not even about legislating anymore. It's about signaling to your particular interest, your particular demographics, that they have to be with you because you're not X, or you're not racist like they are, right? You're not trying to take away your way of life like they are on the left. And so it just collapses down to this sort of rhetorical battle. And that's all that voters ultimately end up with, is like rhetoric that they can get behind, rhetoric that caters to them, rhetoric that panders to them, and nothing actually changes it in order to better their lives and their interests.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's all rhetoric, and when it's all rhetoric, we all lose. Nothing is actually getting done for actual people, and I think that's the worst thing.
A lot is getting done, just nothing for you.
Not for you, but for a lot of other people.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.